G'day everyone and welcome to our first edition of the Coach's Box, brought to you by CrowCast of course. This is some new content that we're bringing to you this year, and I must admit it's taken me a little while to come up with a format that I hope is engaging, but some of the stuff that comes out of it is very interesting, so I think it'll be worthwhile. But I'd be very happy to get your comments and your feedback and your ideas in the comments or in our Discord chat, because I'm happy to refine the format, but I'll keep it as snappy as I possibly can. The first time I put this together earlier in the week, it went for about 45 minutes, and even I was just about falling asleep. So let's get on with it, okay? So before we continue, just a note, we're proudly supported in the Coach's Box and also the preview videos by Once Sport, sports analysis software. It's a fantastic piece of kit. I've been using it extensively, obviously, over the last few weeks. Look, it allows you to track stats. It allows you to cut up footage. It allows you to draw up training boards, all sorts of things. It's a complete sports analysis software kit, and it's not expensive. So if you're listening or watching and you're a junior club, or you're an amateur league club and you're looking for something just to give you a little bit of an edge with the coaching and analysis, I can highly recommend Once Sport. They've been kind enough to give our listeners a 10% discount. So if you do go to onesport.com and like what you see and want to give it a crack, use that code in your checkout and you'll get 10% off. So thanks very much for Once Sport for supporting our podcast. Right, let's get into it. So for those with a short memory, of course, we got up over the Saints fairly comfortably, 63 points, 21-9 to 10 goals, 12. Here are the AFL stats, which I've just put up just for reference. Obviously, what we're trying to do with the Coach's Box is dig a little bit deeper, and try to get to the nuts and bolts of what's going on, rather than just looking at disposal numbers and clearance numbers and all that sort of thing. So first of all, we're going to look at rucks. Now, the majority of the ruck work was done by Riley O'Brien. He attended 31 of the 34 centre bounces. And of those, we achieved a positive result 18 times, which means a clearance basically. Riley Thilthorpe only attended 3 centre bounces, but we had 3 clearances from his attendance. So good stuff from Riley, and he was heavily involved in those clearances as well. When we expand it to have a look at stoppage and throw-ins, though, the story becomes a little bit bleak. As you'll notice, I've come up with a ranking system. The ranking system takes into account for the rucks, effective hit-outs, neutral, hit-outs to opponents, hit-outs lost, turnovers, etc., to try and come up with a balanced ranking system for the 2 rucks that we had. And you can see that whilst Riley scored quite well at centre bounce, it tails off significantly around stoppage and throw-ins, -7 at stoppage and -11 at throw-ins. And a lot of that was due to taps going to the opposition player, particularly at throw-ins. He had a habit of finding the opposition mids half the time, which wasn't great. Riley Thilthorpe, didn't do much around the ground. but he was relatively ineffective in that area too. So a bit to work on by the rucks, certainly around the ground. Riley O'Brien, my sniff test told me that Riley O'Brien's strength was around the ground and he struggled at centre, but that certainly wasn't the case against St Kilda. As I mentioned with my observations here, O'Brien's strength this game was definitely at centre bounce, which was opposite to what I thought. He does stay active at centre bounce, which is a real credit to him. He provides really good give and go options, and he doesn't just sag off, so he provides a real good option there. He did struggle to direct his taps at stoppage, and as I said, 6 out of his 15 hits went to opposition players around stoppage, which is a very high percentage. I'm not sure whether that's his ruck work or setups, but it's certainly something that the coaching staff need to look at during the week. He also at throw-ins, 6 effective hit-outs were offset by 5 lost and 7 hits to the opposition. So again, I'm not sure whether this is a setup issue. I'm not sure whether it's the fault of the mids, but my observation was that Riley was having trouble directing his taps effectively. Moving on to centre clearance influence rankings, and again I've used a similar ranking system for the midfielders. Positive influence on the contest, whether it be a block or a tackle or a shepherd or a disposal or good positioning, etc. So it's not just flat disposals, and you can see here that Matty Crouch attended 26 times for 16 ranking points, Geordie Dawson 20 times for 14 ranking points, Jake Saligo 17 for 13, O'Brien of course with 34, that should actually read 31 from 13, 31 attendances for 13 ranking points. Isaac attended 13 times for 11 ranking points. Now I've decided to weight these because obviously it's offset by the number of attendances, so with the weighted ranking points it changes a little bit. You can see Isaac shoots to the top of the charts, 29 points from 13. Jake Saligo 26 points, Geordie Dawson 24 points, Matty Crouch 21 points, and Sid Draper just shoots in there with 19 points from his little cameo of 9 attendances. And it was good to see that he got a good run when he did come on in terms of centre bounce attendances, and he didn't waste those at all. My observations from centre clearances, again, Rankin's speed and his footy IQ, just elite. He's hard to stop and he's going to be an asset, and hats off to Mark Rashudo for picking him as a non-midfielder when he came to the club. Saligo reads the ball really well. He always hits it at pace. He's one of the things that I notice change from previous years with the Crows is that we are hitting the ball at pace. We're not trying to get body contact as much. We're really working on getting separation, which I've been crying out for ages, and it's good to see. And Jake's a real good proponent of that. Gets separation and hits the hit zone at speed, which is great to see. Geordie didn't get involved inside very much, which is exactly the way we should be using him. He was very much on the periphery and was able to provide outlets on numerous occasions. So we need to be playing Jordan Dawson that way, so that he doesn't get tied up and bashed up inside the contest. Pardon me. Matty Crouch, credit where it's due, he played a fantastic distributor role at centre bounce. He was prolific in terms of getting the first ball and dishing it out, so it was a very good game at centre bounce from Matt, and as I mentioned there, 13 positive actions and 6 effective disposals from centre bounce phase, so that's excellent from Matt. Just needs to pick it up around the ground a bit. As I mentioned, Sid is going to be special. He reads it well, he hits it at pace, he doesn't get pushed off the contest, and most impressively, he doesn't give up. So his second and third efforts are already well above average for a kid his age, and there are a couple of times where he force turnovers or turn the tide back in our favour during a centre bounce phase from a second or third effort. We looked best when we got players coming off the back of the square and off the wings. In the first and the third quarter, when we were really hitting the scoreboard hard, we had Lockie Scholl coming off the wing. We had Mitch Hinge coming off the backside. We had Max Michaelani coming off the half-back line. We even had Wayne Miller at times coming off the back. Second and fourth quarter, it was probably due to the wind, I would imagine. We were more defensive. Those players tended to sit back, but it was really noticeable, particularly Lockie Scholl and Mitch Hinge. Those players are really key to getting an outlet from centre clearance. Look, our work at centre bounce was generally pretty good. I'd probably rate it a 7.5 out of 10, to be honest with you. But it's hard to gauge only because the Saints were a bit slack. They were fairly aggressive with their own setups, even when the scoreboard was against them. They didn't man up well. They didn't read the taps particularly well. Obviously, they struggled a little bit because of their undersized and inexperienced ruckman. Yeah, I think the tail of the tape will become clearer after the Essendon game on the weekend. As I mentioned earlier, around stoppage it tanks a little bit. Here are the rankings. Rankin and Neil Bullen with Jordan Dawson with 4 ranking points. Saligo and Rochelle with 3. It really tailed off around stoppage. I wouldn't say we had our pants pulled down, but they were certainly hanging on for dear life around stoppage. It gets even worse when we talk about throw-ins, the influence rankings here. James Peatling did come into his own a little bit at throw-ins, a couple of really, really strong efforts during that phase. Isaac continued just with his smarts and a couple of times just hitting the lane, where Angels fear to tread and just dancing his way through. One in particular where he snapped that point, he'd be dark on himself. That was a beautiful move. Lockie Scholl with 5 got involved around throw-ins. Jake Saligo was busy and Josh Rochelle chimed in as well a couple of times when the ball was in our forward 50 for throw-ins. My observation around these phases, we weren't great, to be honest with you, and we were terrible at throw-ins. That's the frank assessment. Ruck struggled to be effective. It's either poor ruck work or it's poor setups or communication, I'm not sure, but I hope that they've worked on that hard during the week. Most would say these phases are O'Brien's strength, but as I mentioned, he was very inconsistent with his ruck work and his hit-outs, and really needs to lift that part of his game next week as well. Crouch was also far less effective in these phases. He's very much a sit under the ball type of player, and when the situations are a little bit more dynamic and players are moving a lot more, he tends to struggle. He got blocked a couple of times and he also just failed to trail his man in on a few occasions. So Matty's got to lift his game around these phases because it really does offset the good work that he does at centre bounce. Rankin speed and step, once again, it's evident in all 3 phases. But the only thing that I would say is that a couple of times, particularly in defensive 50, he was a little bit lazy. I don't know whether that was a product of the scoreboard. We did set up quite surprisingly aggressively in our defensive 50. I don't know whether that was by design or just how it turned out, but Isaac got caught napping a couple of times. As I mentioned, James Peatling came into his own, very strong. Second and third efforts really good. Doesn't get brushed off the ball, and that was a real strength of his. And we definitely have set players in forward 50, particularly Tex and Benny Keys seem to have a little bit of telepathy going. A couple of times Benny hit the lane hard, and Tex just couldn't get it to him, but they're certainly set up that way. So final award rankings, what I'm calling the Engine Room Award for 2025, which is essentially a midfielders and ruck award. We have Rankin sitting on 40 points, Saliga on 32, Dawson 29, Crouch 23, and Sid Draper for a quarter and a half sneaks in there at 19 points. Well done, Sid. As I mentioned, and keep saying, fantastic effort by the young lad. So my final thoughts, look, our centre bounce work, if we continue, will trouble most sides if we maintain that standard. We need to maintain it against stiffer opposition. We'll come up against far better midfields than St Kilda, and we need to maintain that level of standard under more pressure. We'll be broken open at stoppage by the Bombers if we put up the same performance around the ground as we did against St Kilda. The Bombers are far quicker, they have more quality, and if we're lazy and set up poorly around these phases, we'll get touched up. As I mentioned, Matty Crouch needs to pick up his game around the ground because it really does offset some of the fantastic work that he does in the centre square. James Peatling, I think, just needs to be a little bit more proactive, particularly at centre square. He tends to be reactive and defensive, and that's fine, but he's got a lot to offer, and I think he just needs to back himself a little more and try to get to a few more hit zones rather than just making sure that his opponent doesn't get the ball, albeit we don't know whether that's the job that he's been assigned. But there are a couple of times where I observed that he just trailed his opponent in a little bit. And as I keep saying, Sid could be anything. It was a great cameo and some great signs from him going forward. And hopefully he gets a little bit more time against Essendon, because we might need his pace coming up against the Bombers. That's all we have from the Coach's Box Clearance Edition. Don't forget, I will be releasing a Between the Arcs and In the Arcs edition of this week's rounds. Waiting whether to call the In the Arcs award the Nurra Award. I don't know. Give me a comment. See if that's appropriate. Pardon me. Sorry for the frog in my throat too. So they'll be dropping over the next couple of days, and as I mentioned, going forward, these will be released a little bit earlier in the week now that I've settled on a format. So happy for your thoughts and your comments and suggestions. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye.